Trend following as a strategy is often referred to as a black box, like if there was something bad going on inside. And it was refreshing to hear Scott Foster talk about why trend following is in fact a white box or a transparent box compared to many other algorithmic strategies, which are often embraced by investors to a much larger degree. So I'm delighted to share these insights from a conversation I had with Scott, where he also touches on the essential question, why are there trends and why ought there be trends in the future? So sit back and relax and enjoy this unique short clip with observations from Scott. And if you would like to listen to the full conversation, just go to toptradersunplugged.com/27 and /28. No, but that was a very important explanation, and it ties into so many other things. And I want to go further than this, but I want to actually ask you a question that actually doesn't relate to short-term trading.
Sure.
But it's my kind of trying to understand what it is you're saying and putting into a slightly different perspective, and that's relates to more generally speaking about trend following. Because obviously, as we know, you mentioned 1994, and I remember seeing, all the great guys sitting lined up at a conference in Chicago and talking, about a very difficult period. But they were convinced that this was just, a difficult period and things would come back. But let me ask you this: trends in markets in general, not necessarily short term, but just generally, is that kind of based on universal truth? Because at the end of the day, trends reflect human behavior, and human behavior will never change. And what we're seeing now then, where perhaps there have been a lack of trends for a period of time, is just part of, a normal cycle.
Absolutely. I often express my, I don't say unhappiness, but I think trend followers could do a much better job of explaining what they're doing. Everybody seems to want to be a scientist, and nothing wrong with that. It's just that I gave a talk a few years ago in Monaco on this about the difference between what we would call black box and what I would call white box, and I was trying to make a differentiation between some forms of systematic trading and some forms of systematic/algorithmic trading. And the fact that the vast majority of what, people outside that are in the alternative industry won't invest in systematic strategies because they don't feel like they have the expertise to understand them or the mathematical skills to. And I was trying to make a case that, well, as it pertains to the vast majority of managed futures, they're not black box. And the reason being is, what are they going after? And I tried to make a case that they're going after a universal. When you ask a trend follower, why do you make money? If they start talking about formulas and all this type of stuff, the question is, well, they're really the only way they can make money is if they're trends. The question is, well, why are there trends and why ought there to be trends in the future? And a trend follower, when asked, why are you going to make money in the future? I think they should respond, because trends cannot not exist. Yeah. And the question, what exactly in particular does that mean? Well, it's what you said. It's the fact that, at least in a free society, markets exist to create efficiencies for the greater good. And if the price of wheat, if we start running out of wheat, the price has to go higher it has to ration the remaining supply. It has to ration the remaining demand. It has to increase the supply. It has to incentivize people to plant more wheat because we're running out of it. And if we didn't have, futures markets were created for that purpose, and without them, the prices of food would be fluctuating all over the place. But at the end of the day, there are inefficiencies that you can arb out of the market, and there are inefficiencies that you can't arb out of a market. The ones you can't arb out of a market are natural law inefficiencies, or universals, as you've called them and I've called them. And trends are one of them. If you're running out of wheat, you can't arb that out. The price is going higher, and nobody can stop it. Unless the government steps in and subsidizes something or gets in the way of it. The market will go where it needs to go until there is an equilibrium between the buyers and the sellers. So in theory, and this is Austrian theory, that trends are necessary. I mean, there are short time periods, and this is what's hard to explain to people who are following trend followers around, because usually the time periods of equilibrium are not as long as they had been. And so there are times when trend followers, they're just, some of the markets just randomly are, they happen to be fairly valued. And nothing changes that in the future. But unless, we become perfect prognosticators and you know exactly how much of any given commodity is going to be needed, a year from now, and exactly how much supply to create to meet that need, which nobody can know that. I mean, we've tried command economies, it doesn't work. There's no way to plan. The socialist calculation debate is completely devastated the idea of central planning because you don't know how, the trend will tell you what to do. The trend will tell you whether you need more wheat or you need more copper or you need more of, or whatever you have until there's an equal amount so that everybody's needs are served. So right now, it's, I think it's pretty obvious at this point to everybody that the Federal Reserve and government intrusion in the marketplace, particularly through suppression of interest rates, has been devastating for price discovery in pretty much all freely traded markets. They're not allowed to go. I mean, when you control the price of money, you control the price of everything. And when there is a threat of constant intervention through regulation, taxation, and nobody really knows because the government and the Federal Reserve don't know where they're going with this. They pretend they do, but they don't. And most businessmen know they don't know, and there's no exit strategy. And so it's created incredible suppression of price trends, and it's created volatility with no direction. It's created it's wreaked havoc on the markets. But eventually, if you look at it and say, what is this ultimately? This is ultimately a price control. Right. And price controls ultimately create the exact opposite of their intended effect. Yeah. The question is, how long is it going to take? The markets will eventually, they'll go crazy. I mean, they're going to go to where they need to go, where they have not been allowed to go. And hopefully that won't be too far in the future so that, the business is still around and exists to take advantage of it. But I think it's probably closer than it's been, but I probably would have said that a year ago. Sure. But I think it's a certainty. It's just a question of how long can the government and global governments keep this, illusion up? Because right now, as we mentioned earlier, the perception is based upon, spreads, yields on junk. There is no risk. Yeah. Lowest volatility levels in fixed income, foreign exchange ever. Stock market just a month ago had finished 40 straight days without moving a percent, which it hadn't done in over 20 years. The market is not pricing any risk into the situation, which is irrational, but
that's the way
irrationality can last longer than a lot of firms can stay solvent. So
back to the magic, the perception is there is no risk.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's very interesting. But let me ask you this. Well, first of all, let me just say that I can imagine with the explanation you gave about, philosophy and universal truth that there aren't that much room in a normal due diligence questionnaire to fill out the box where it says, I believe in universal truth as one of my founding principles. So, but let me ask you then this question. If that's the case, and this is the way you develop models, which is quite different from most other managers, is your model decay, which a lot of short-term managers is saying that there is model decay in the way they trade, and maybe a model lasts 2 years. But is my understanding correct then that in fact you don't really see that as such, or at least not to the same extent?
That's true. Model decay is not generally something that I worry about. For me, for a model that starts to underperform what it has in the past, we tend to be a lot more qualitative about that. To give you an example of how like one of our models might decay as opposed to how somebody else's models, because again, we're not looking at parameters in our models are not numbers with lots of decimal places to the right. They're mostly binary switches. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do this, because it's much more qualitative. It's almost like how a discretionary trader would trade a 2 or 3 day move in the marketplace based upon how he would feel like he's reacting to a bunch of other traders that are doing something. Yeah. The decay would be something that is more tied to the structure of the market and very little to do with parameter sets or other things. Like, for example, years ago, quite a long time ago, we had some models that were trading off where the opening price was. And back at that time period, and for many years prior to that, there was a real psychology about a gap.
Right.
And a lot of people have written about it. Will the gap be closed? Will this happen? And so forth. And I had some models that I thought that there was a reason why there would be, under certain conditions, overreaction on the open.
Right.
And then I would go against that. It was part of, it was part of our reversion strategies repertoires, and it tied out to this particular psychology of what was going on here. And over time, that model started to deteriorate. Mm-hmm. And you get to a point where, you're always reviewing performance everywhere, like, okay, what's going on here? And then the light bulb goes off. Well, as electronic trading and off hours and Globex started to become more and more prevalent, and as more people in Europe and Asia were having access to the same or similar markets, risk was being able to be transferred more effectively around the clock.
Right.
So the pent-up demand on the open was slowly diminishing. I mean, there still is some, but it's usually retail people executing on the open while the professionals pull all their orders and they create the big zigzag in the first 10 minutes. But it's not. It's a different character than it used to have. And so when we understand this is the psychology that we're doing, we're tying this out to this one principle. But the market structure itself is no longer offering us the opportunity to utilize that principle in this construct. Then we make an adjustment to it, which is not as that type of thing isn't happening. It's not like all of our different models. We think that every day they're slightly deteriorating by 0.01%, and then it's always a clock that we have to. And I don't think of that way at all. As a matter of fact, I can nothing is more surprising to me when I dust off a model that I haven't even touched in 15 years, and it's at new equity highs. It's just it's one of those things that that makes you feel great. Most of the times that I can track back to underperformance or poor performance for any stretch of time rarely can be tied to a bad parameter set. Usually it's tied to a principle that wasn't fully tied out, or even worse, which is you're always balancing, trying to make decisions about things, but one of the biggest risks is changing anything about your models. Because you can have incredible slippage. You stop trading one model because it's doing poorly, and then you add one that's doing well, but then all of a sudden the one that you just dumped has a huge recovery and the one you got in does poorly. And all you have to do is do that a couple times in succession, and you're looking at double your max drawdown and all your clients are going away. So the way, a process by which you implement changes is as important as the changes themselves. But a big part of that is understanding what's driving the changes, because things that are coming from a universal are a lot different than things that are coming from the particulars, in my opinion, anyway.
That's it for now. And remember that if you want to listen to the full conversation with Scott, please go over to toptradersunplugged.com/27 and /28. If you enjoyed this short, insightful clip from a past episode of the show, then you will love the free book I'm giving away right now. It's called The Many Flavors of Trend Following, and it includes some of my best insights on this perhaps the most dependable and consistent yet often overlooked investment strategy. And you can get the free copy right now at toptradersunplugged.com/book and start your own investment journey today. So again, just jump over to toptradersunplugged.com/book and make sure to subscribe to the podcast or YouTube channel, where I'll be back next week with more exciting and engaging conversations. Until next time, take care.